Welcome to the Christian Channel Podcast. I'm your host, Austin Kelly, and today's guest is someone who's pushing the frontier of indie cinema in a bold new direction. Robert Eric Jenkins is the director of Hell to Pay, a gritty Western short film that went viral, ranking up over 82,000 organic views on YouTube. He's a graduate of JP Catholic Film School, co-director of Generation Debt, now streaming on Tubi and on the Christian Channel. And he's got a finger on the pulse of where filmmaking is heading in the age of AI, streaming, and the short form viral content. Robert, welcome to the show. It's really great to have you here.
Hey, it's really great to be here, Austin. Thanks.
Now, let's start with Hell to Pay, a short Western indie budget, no Hollywood machine behind it, yet you've pulled in 82,000 views organically. What do you think clicked with the audiences, and what can other indie filmmakers learn from that kind of viral traction?
Hell to Pay was my first real serious foray into the world of online distribution. I'd uploaded a few things to YouTube before, but nothing had really, gained any significant traction. Um, and yeah, it was really awesome and surprising that the first cut of Hell to Pay that I uploaded got, I believe it's like 30,000 views in a relatively short amount of time. One of the things that I learned from just kind of a from that experience was just the importance of tailoring content for the YouTube audience and for the YouTube algorithm. And I was actually able to make some changes with like some different versions of the film that I subsequently uploaded to really take advantage of how the YouTube algorithm works. Um, so, for instance, one of the big things that I learned is make sure that your file name that you upload matches the actual title you intend to use of the video. Make sure that the title, the thumbnail, and then the like opening shot of your video are all cohesive, so that when people click on it, they will immediately get what they came for, and they won't think it's clickbait. Um, One of the other things that really helped was just the fact that I used shorts as well as the long form stuff. The ability to link a long form video on your channel to the shorts, that was huge because the shorts get put out to a much wider audience, and then you get in their watch history, and then YouTube will then later recommend your other stuff to them. It's kind of this weird catch 22 where with YouTube, the best way to be seen by someone is to already be in their watch history. And it's like, okay, well, how do you get in the first place? Shorts is the way to do that. And I think that YouTube started doing that as a response to TikTok. But yeah, that was one of the big lessons that I learned. To me, the shorts are kind of like the Imperial probe droids, where you just send out thousands of them throughout the galaxy, and then they, find your audience hidden on all these rebel bases and bring them back to your Star Destroyer or your Death Star. With shorts, that's kind of that's a whole nother thing. But yeah, with the long form stuff, that was some of the big lessons that I learned. And so, as a filmmaker today, you have to be cognizant of things like that. I think that a big mistake that I see, not just indie filmmakers, but even studios to some degree, is that the idea of what they're going to do once they've actually completed the movie and it's in the can is kind of an afterthought. And that's a huge mistake. You should put as much thought into how you're actually going to get eyeballs on the movie as you do onto how can I make this the best movie I possibly can. Because if no one watches it, at the end of the day, it could be this massive creative achievement, but unfortunately, you've kind of hidden your light under a bushel, so to speak. You know, because as filmmakers, obviously, we want as many people to see it. Specifically as many people within our target audience. Okay, maybe we don't want everyone to see it. We prefer like the real diehard fans. In my case, the Western fans. So anyway, it was just kind of like a big lesson in that. My next project, I'll definitely have a better idea of how to begin with the end in mind, and to really dial in on my target audience. So does that answer the question?
I think it does. I was going to add to that. When you started filming this project, did you already have knowledge about YouTube, or did you learn YouTube, like all that algorithmic, knowledge after you filmed?
After, it was well after. Yeah. I was an early, YouTube early adapter and avid YouTube watcher. But when I started making Hell to Pay, YouTube was a totally different landscape. At the time, I didn't really consider YouTube as a viable distribution source, just because um, it was before TikTok, it was before Shorts, and around 2022, 2023, when YouTube introduced the Shorts, they really reinvigorated their platform, as far as I'm concerned. It really, YouTube was kind of reaching kind of a deadlock, kind of a gridlock. I felt like, it just, I specifically remember thinking around the year, um, like 2017 or so, 2017, 2018, kind of thinking like, man, if I wanted to get into the YouTube scene, I should have started years ago, because now it's just like super saturated. And how do you compete with someone like Mr. Beast or whatever? But the simple fact is you don't have to compete with really anyone. So first of all, you shouldn't even have that mindset of like, oh, how am I going to compete with so and so on YouTube? Don't worry about it, because at least for me, there are certain topics that I have an interest in on YouTube. But guess what? I'm subscribed to multiple creators who all cover that same topic. So there's really no competition. There is to some degree. You want to make the best content possible, and if you're just cranking out just some really low quality, you know, something that's like very obviously just like a copy and paste type of script and popped into in video AI or something, and there's, it's just kind of you took 2 seconds to make it, and there's no real fingerprints of your own on it. Then yeah, you don't expect to do well. But don't let the idea of there being other people on the platform doing better than you or whatever, don't let that hold you back. Don't let that be an excuse, because there's so many people on the platform. And like for instance, dinosaurs, that's a topic I'm interested in. I'm subscribed to multiple dinosaur channels, specifically like dinosaurs in movies, because I love dinosaur movies. There's multiple channels that cover that topic that I subscribe to, and there's enough space for everyone on there. So that would be something. But when they brought in the Shorts, like I said, it really reinvigorated the entire platform, and really it changed the rules, and it made it a lot easier, for someone like me who I had like pretty small number of subscribers. I don't know. It was like 100 or something. Maybe it was 300 something. I don't remember. Pretty insignificant. And I'm still not a huge channel, but in a very short amount of time, I had over 5,000 subscribers. And most of those subscribers came from a single short that I made. And that short was just like a 10-second snippet from my long 30-minute Hell to Pay Western. So, yeah, shorts are great. Shorts are great. You don't necessarily get as many watch hours from the shorts. You do. You'd be surprised how many. You could get, over 1,000 watch hours very easily from like a 5-second short. But yeah, it's a good time to be on the platform. They've made it easy for creators, and the tools and just the things that are at our disposal now that exist that did not exist just a few years ago. It's incredible. It's mind blowing, the stuff you can do.
Today's episode is brought to you by Filmmakers Academy. Look, everybody knows the film industry is tough to break into, and here's the truth. Most traditional film schools will leave you drowning in debt, and half the time you're still unprepared for the real-world challenges of working in Hollywood. That's why Filmmakers Academy is such a game changer. For just a fraction of the cost of film school, you get practical training from working industry pros, one-on-one coaching, and a global community of filmmakers all moving toward the same dream. Whether you're just getting started or you want to take your career to the next level, this is the smarter, more affordable way forward. So don't wait. Go to filmmakersacademy.com and start your journey today. And here's the kicker. Use coupon code LEGENDSMITH25 at checkout for 25% off. That's filmmakersacademy.com. Links in the bio.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And you touched on a very valuable point. I mean, our audience doesn't know that when we were barely getting to know each other, I think you had about maybe a dozen subscribers. And then after you posted that video, it literally I've never seen that before, where it goes from literally 12 to 13 subscribers to over 5,000. I think what number are you at? 5,200 subscribers?
I'm at 5,500 and
Okay.
like 5,500 something right now. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And
So
that's just from one piece of content, right?
yes, however, I did, full disclosure here, I did repurpose it a little bit, and this is where those in your audience that are interested in filmmaking or that are interested in building a YouTube channel, I'm gonna kind of loosen my tie and give you some of the dirty tricks that aren't formally discussed. But one of the things that I did was I was able to repurpose the same film that I made, and it's a good film. I worked very hard on it. I'm very proud of it. But I realized that there are ways that I could adapt it. So, for instance, on YouTube, there are full-length episodes of classic Western TV shows like The Rifleman with Chuck Connors. And he's got this specially modified Winchester carbine. I think it's a 1873 model. It's a classic TV series, and I noticed that all of the episodes of that show, it's a black and white show, and so the thumbnails for that show depict like a scene from the episode with the rifleman in a very specific red font. And I thought, okay, what if I took my existing Hell to Pay and then I made a copy of it where I put a layer in Adobe Premiere and basically just made it black and white, and then added a film grain and re-uploaded it with a different title. And I re-uploaded it as Rifleman's Revenge, because when you guys watch, all of my ramblings will make much more sense if you watch my movie. But in the opening scene, the character that I play has a lever action rifle. So I thought, okay, well, I will capitalize on the fact that my character has this rifle and it looks very similar to the Chuck Connor show. So I just called it Rifleman's Revenge, and I used that same exact font and made the thumbnail look like it was an episode of The Rifleman, and it did really well. And it got almost as many views as the original version, and I really didn't have to do much to. It was. Let me tell you, it was way easier than making a whole new movie. Yeah. So, and it kind of like it showed the project to a slightly different segment of the of the Western fan audience. So I think some people that may not would have watched the film otherwise were exposed to it because of that.
Yeah, you definitely reached out to a whole new genre, a whole new audience, and you knew those YouTube tricks to borrow that audience from that very popular show, and you leveraged it, and you got those subscribers to subscribe to your channel. Everyone's talking about AI right now, right? I mean, you got from writing scripts to generating VFX. As a filmmaker, do you see AI as a tool that helps indie directors level the playing field, or do you think it's a threat to the authenticity of cinema?
It's both. It's very much both. Um, this is a big topic. We could go on and on about this. What I would say about AI is be an early adapter. If you, as an indie filmmaker, if you haven't at least experimented with it and seen what you can create, I would encourage you to do so, because the genie's out of the bottle. AI is here, generative AI stuff is here, and it's really scary. I feel very much like there's this classic anecdote from the making of Jurassic Park in which a very famous and talented stop motion animator named Phil Tippett, who worked on Star Wars and a bunch of other projects. Well, Jurassic Park originally was going to use a specific type of stop motion animation called go motion, where the puppet actually there's a motion blur basically, but other than that, it's like the old King Kong stop motion. And but then Spielberg was shown some CGI dinosaurs that ILM was able to make, and he switched gears and decided to go in that direction. So there is no actual stop motion or go motion on screen in Jurassic Park. And when Phil Tippett saw the CGI footage, he said, I think I'm extinct. And the line was so poignant that it actually ended up in the movie. Jeff Goldblum's character says it. It's not a line that's in the book. But here's the interesting thing, is that Phil Tippett's stop motion animation experience actually came in very handy, because they figured out that they could create a fully articulated T-Rex model that Phil Tippett could then animate, and then the model was connected to the computer, and it became like a hands-on interface that allowed him to do computer animation with the hands-on animation style that he was doing. So the reason I tell this seemingly tangential and pointless story is, don't allow all of the hard work that you've put into learning your craft of filmmaking go to waste because some 13-year-old kid happens to be really good with AI. You know what I mean? Don't be that guy. Rather, use that extensive knowledge that you have, or that you should have. I'm talking about your knowledge of lenses, your knowledge of blocking, your knowledge of camera angles, your knowledge of how composition should be put together, and all of those psychological subliminal things that really good filmmakers know. Apply that to AI, so then that 13-year-old kid won't kick your ass, because he might otherwise. So in the same way that Phil Tippett was able to use his stop motion expertise and apply it to the new disruptive technology of CGI, we're just going to have to evolve too. And as OG old school filmmakers, we have that advantage, because we know, we understand how to use lenses to create a certain effect, and we understand blocking and composition and subtext and all those things that make cinema poetic, that, someone who's just randomly never really thought seriously about a movie but has access to a really good generative AI, they may not. So yeah, there is a danger, but I think that right now you can always tell if something is generative AI. It's just kind of soulless. But there's some really cool stuff out there. There's a lot of really cool AI generated videos that I think are really cool. It's really promising. I think that it has the potential to completely democratize film. I could see the days are coming, whether we like it or not, when someone is going to create a fully AI feature film. And it's really scary for me as a filmmaker to think about that, because it's like, well, what about the craft? What about all the hard work that someone would have to put in? Think about all of the extras and all the people that had to work on a movie like Ben-Hur, the 1959 one, or something like that. And then it's kind of like the Genesis device from Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, where it's just like all of a sudden there's just like this new technology. And, Dr. McCoy, the line in Wrath of Khan, we're talking about the potential of this Genesis device is, God created the world in 6 days. The Genesis will come along and do it for you in 6 minutes. And you remember that scene in Star Trek II? It's such an awesome movie. It's one of the best directed movies ever. Holy mackerel. Speaking of blocking and composition and subtext, watch Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. It's awesome. Better yet, get the DVD and watch it with a commentary on. There's actually 2 different commentaries from the director. They're both great. But the plus side is, like I said before, is that AI has such a potential to be a democratizing force for filmmaking. Someone who may never otherwise have been able to get their feature made might, be able to make it with AI. And I've thought about it too, because I have big dreams for all the movies that I want to make, and I thought, but there's so many moving parts. It requires so much, money to make a movie, and it's becoming an increasingly big gamble these days. I mean, look at Marvel. They're kind of crapping their pants right now because what used to be their cash cow just isn't anymore. And in their case, it's different because it's not that the world has superhero fatigue. I think the world just has bad movie fatigue. But their reputation is so damaged that they're, not only are they having a hard time making a movie that makes $1 billion, they're having a hard time making a movie that makes $500 million. And so if they're having a hard time, it's hard for people like you and I, Austin, to make something that's 30 minutes long, let alone, a feature. So, given the choice between not having the ability to make a feature film at all or making one with AI, I'd rather make one than not. But, it obviously I'd rather make the movie the old-fashioned way. But AI has a lot of other exciting potential that people don't talk about. People always think of the generative aspect of it. But there's other aspects too, like the ability to use AI for rotoscoping. So I'm going to get a little bit technical here. Rotoscoping is a process. It was invented by, I think his name was Richard Fleischer. He was the guy that back in the 30s and 40s, he made the Popeye cartoons, Betty Boop cartoons, and the first animated adaptation of Superman. It was actually the first time Superman flew. Before that, in the comics, he could only jump really high. Anyway, this Fleischer guy invented this process called rotoscoping, which is essentially like tracing actual still frames from film and being able to like trace them and translate them into animation. Nowadays, rotoscoping refers typically to the process of like painting out something in a frame.
Yep.
And I had to do a lot of rotoscoping on my Western. There's one scene in particular where we filmed with a drone in wintertime, and there were all these snowmobile tracks covering all the snow. And obviously, the movie is supposed to take place in 1875, so the snowmobile tracks would be a dead giveaway that it's not 1875. And it was very tedious having to like manually, frame by frame, paint out all those snowmobile tracks. Where AI comes in is that you could use that to just kind of like click on one frame and then it will analyze the rest and do it for you. So that's another aspect of AI that people aren't talking about as much. That's more not on one extreme, but is kind of like in the weeds a little bit. So AI offers filmmakers a lot of time-saving potential in post-production, specifically in editing, in compositing, sound design. A lot of really powerful post-production potential.
No, I totally agree. And, they say that AI is going to take a lot of our jobs. We used a lot of AI for our new series that you acted in, Knights of the Cross episode 2, the finale.
Yeah.
And I want the audience to know, we traditionally, when you work with a VFX team, the costs could go up to $60,000 to $180,000 really quick.
Yeah.
With AI, our VFX budget went all the way down.
Yeah.
So
and that's really important. Right now, feature films, it's not that they're not making money, because they are. Fantastic Four is considered a box office. It's a flop. That movie still made something like $500 million. I don't know about you, Austin, but to me, that's a lot of money.
Yes. Yeah, 500 million. Yes, exactly.
The problem is that the cost of the project is so exorbitant for various reasons. There's so much, there's a lot of reasons why it's getting so expensive to make movies. So to be able to use AI to bring costs down is really important, because yes, we're making art, and yes, it's a noble, good thing to do to create a piece of art that expresses truth, beauty, and goodness. Not every Hollywood movie does that, but at the end of the day, it's the movie business. It's got to make money. It has to. We got to do our best to make projects profitable, and that's not being greedy. It's not being, you know, some kind of whatever, cigar chomping monopoly man that's rubbing his hands together. That's called being financially responsible.
There seems to be like a bad taste in a lot of people's mouth too with AI because like you have Francis Ford Coppola. He made Megapolis, starring Shia LaBeouf. And I've noticed that they did use AI in a big chunk of the film towards the end. And I think for us, filmmakers, if Francis Ford Coppola, the guy that made Tucker and another, a lot of, wasn't The Godfather, if he's using I think that gives us a pass. We could use AI too. I just think there's a lot of stigma in our industry that, if you use AI, you're a cheapo or, I don't know. Are you hearing rumors like that on your end as a filmmaker?
Well, there are concerns specifically when it comes to using the likeness of actors or their voices, you know, and that is an area where I do um, have a lot of concern. I don't want to be on YouTube one day and then all of a sudden see my face being used in an ad for some product I've never heard of or condone, and I'm not getting a cut from it. You know what I mean? Like it happened to Joe Rogan, where his likeness and his voice was cloned essentially with AI to say a bunch of stuff that he never said or intended. So that's something that concerns me. My biggest concern with AI is not necessarily that it's going to become Skynet from Terminator. Um, one of the big dangers with AI in general is that AI is really good at telling you what you already want to hear, and it could deprive us from the ability to think for ourselves, as if that could not already, as if you know, um, that we're not already in danger. So that's something that concerns. Stealing people's likenesses, especially like with the generative AI, that's concerning. Don't believe a darn thing you see in the news or whatever. You just don't know. The new Mission Impossible movie definitely leans into the Skynet idea, where essentially the AI becomes this super intelligence, this sentient being. You know, um, Not necessarily sure it really is possible for that to happen or not, but um, one of the things that movie did really well is to show the potential social effects of AI being used to deceive people through the news and stuff like that. Did you see the new Mission Impossible?
No, I
The
didn't get to it. Was it really good?
Yeah, I liked it. It wasn't my favorite of the Mission Impossible film series, but it was really good. It was a really good way to finish the movie. As the end to a beloved spy franchise, I think it did a much better job than did No Time to Die. Um, you know, I love Bond, but I think that I think Final Reckoning, Mission Impossible Final Reckoning, kind of tied it up a little bit on a more optimistic note. You know, as far as like the dangers of having your face and your likeness taken, I think there are legal protections. That was one of the big things that the recent SAG strikes were about. You know,
Yeah, I totally agree. It's so unethical to take somebody else's likeness, and we had the opportunity to do that in our film, and honestly, it was one unethical
yeah,
likeness, and so we ended up hiring a very talented voiceover artist to narrate the series for us, and it's a world of difference. And that's my best advice to any filmmaker out there, like like yourself. If if you really want your project to stand out, use AI for those mundane tasks that you were mentioning, but hire the talent, like the super good talent, like yourself. We hired you as an actor. Did a great job, by the way.
Thank you.
And also John Wilson was in the project, and a very talented voiceover actor was in the project, and everybody involved. Our VFX artist used AI more or less for doing those mundane tasks and making those. It's a world we're building. If our audience doesn't know, we filmed a Crusader film about the Battle of Jaffa, which is not cheap, by the way.
Yeah, no.
But it definitely popped out. And, our film is a Catholic film. So it leads me to my next question. You did study at JP Catholic, which is a very famous Catholic film school that takes faith seriously in the creative process. How has the Catholic Foundation shaped the way you approach stories, characters, and the purpose of film itself?
Even before I had the remarkable opportunity to attend JP Catholic, which was one of the like golden, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory golden ticket moments of my life, really. I had to resolve to. So I've always had this idea that as artists and as filmmakers, we have an unspoken agreement with the audience. In the same way that a doctor must take the Hippocratic Oath, do no harm to the patient, when you go to the doctor's office, you assume that to be the case. You go there to be healed and helped. The doctor may have to cut you open with a scalpel to remove the tumor or whatever it is, but the ultimate teleological goal of the doctor is to help you physically. And in an analogous way, there is a unspoken agreement between the artist and the audience that through the art, the artist will tell the truth. Now, when I say tell the truth, I don't necessarily mean report the journalistic historical facts, right? Because something like Lord of the Rings obviously is not, history in the literal sense. But truth it transcends fact. Truth is something that is transcendent of fact. Truth is knowledge of the good. Truth is knowledge of beauty. And a lot of art doesn't do that. There's a lot of crap out there. There's a lot of just bogus crap that you don't want your kids watching and that you shouldn't be watching either. And it's not to say that that everything has to be rated G and everything has to be some kind of naive Teletubbies or anything like that. No, of course not. There's a legitimate place for hard R war movies, Saving Private Ryan type stuff, and even horror movies, which I'm not a big horror guy. I really don't care for them. I think that they can be a slippery slope, but there is an argument to be made that there is some valid place for them. A lot of horror movies have a good moral. Don't play with evil. Don't go into the cabin in the woods. There's some practical wisdom to be gleaned from some of them, not all of them. Anyway, so I've always just had this conviction and a desire to create stories that accurately depict human nature and that give heroes that we can aspire to, and that provide a moral example and that help the audience to grow in virtue, while also entertaining them and not preaching to them, not hitting them over the head, not coming at them with some kind of agenda, but just something that inspires them to be a good person. And that's one of the reasons why the original Star Wars trilogy is so timeless, is because it does that. And that's also one of the reasons why the prequel trilogy has enjoyed such a complete reevaluation in the last couple of years. You know, in the early 2000s, as those movies were coming out, there were so many detractors, and there's so many people just poo-pooing those movies. And yes, they have their flaws, but in retrospect, there is a through line. There is a clear moral ascendancy and decline. It puts on display what happens when a person falls from grace, and that's important too, because it's a cautionary tale.
Mm-hmm.
The story of Anakin Skywalker is a cautionary tale and a powerful one. And that's one of the reasons why, the sequel trilogy is an artistic failure, is that the writers and the executives did not, whether they grasped it, whether they cared, I'm not sure, but it didn't come across. There wasn't this, the universe as they presented it was not the moral universe that George Lucas presented, which accurately reflects our own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it just feels like Hollywood has a bit of an identity crisis, right?
Yeah.
And with strikes, budget cuts, reboots, that they just don't hit. And meanwhile, Tubi and indie filmmakers like ourselves are exploding on the scene. What's the future of Hollywood? And are we moving into a world where smaller creators are going to dominate the landscape?
Yeah, I think so. Real quick though, going back to your other question, because I went off on an outrageous tangent. But with JP Catholic, attending JP Catholic just further galvanized that resolve I had, and gave me a lot of a great understanding of the Bible and the structure of the Bible, not just as a not just as a religious tome, but also as a piece of literature, and as a cultural foundation stone. The simple fact is that Western civilization, the civilization that you most likely are in, and that you were completely incubated and grown into, is built on essentially the Judeo-Christian traditions and the Greco-Roman traditions.
Mm-hmm.
And the Bible is a huge part of that. And so if you don't understand the Bible, then regardless of whether you're religious or not, you don't understand a lot of the world in which you live. Mm-hmm. And that was a really wonderful thing, other than the filmmaking aspect, because it is a film school. So I did learn a lot about the process of filmmaking and the theory and the application. Of course, nothing could ever replace actually making movies. You have to do that. You can't just study making movies, because if you just do that, you'll never be a filmmaker. You actually have to make films. Spoiler alert. Anyway, so that was something, another huge thing that JB Catholic instilled in me, as well as obviously just an increased devotion to the Eucharist and to, the Blessed Virgin Mary and all those great things that, have been just the things that I've run to and sought solace in the dark times of my life. So I'm very, very glad that I was able to have that experience. So now that I've sufficiently answered your previous question, your current one, does the future of filmmaking lie in the hands of small independent filmmakers? Yes, I think so. Going back to kind of the dinosaur analogy, in a lot of ways, the studios and these big heavy hitters, Disney, Warner Brothers, all these guys, they're kind of like the big lumbering dinosaurs. And there's this big asteroid that's just hit, several actually. One of them is streaming. The other is, mainly streaming. The other, to some degree, is AI. But they're having a hard time adapting. And it's ironic because they have all these resources and they have all these, the full might of the galactic empire, so to speak. But they're having a hard time really focusing all of those resources into an effective product. And yeah, I think that a lot of indie filmmakers like you and I, we're nimble. We can be more fluid. You know, we aren't we are not attached to all of these old ways of doing things. We're not part of this huge system that has all of these middle manager type jobs, many of which are just fat and excess within this giant machine. What it feels like to me right now, Austin, is it reminds me a lot of how it was in the late 60s and the 70s, the New Hollywood movement. You know, when a lot of the Xanax and these guys that own the studios, they were getting old, they were dying, they're selling off the studios to various other, like, you know, beverage companies and stuff like that. And these other companies didn't necessarily understand movies, but they had a pretty good sense of marketing because they were used to selling products to people. And it gave people like George Lucas and Steven Spielberg and John Milius and Francis Ford Coppola and John Landis and, you know, all these other, you know, filmmakers that are, okay, maybe not all of them are household names still, but their movies are still very, very famous. You know, they're getting remade left, right, and center. It gave them opportunities that would not ever have existed under the old Hollywood system. You know, and so the way I see it right now is the big guys are in trouble. And I think the big reason why is, personally, I think it's streaming. With streaming, they have dug themselves into a hole, and then in the bottom of that hole, they have painted themselves into a corner. Let me explain. 20, 30 years ago, there were more mid-budget movies. You know, like Matt Damon talks a bit about this on that show, Hot Wings. He articulates it very well. How back then, movies essentially had two opportunities to make money. First was when they're in the theaters. Movies were in theaters longer back then. You know, movies used, like nowadays, like for instance, I just checked, Superman is still F1. They're still in the theaters right now. I was really surprised to hear that because usually it seems like a movie nowadays is in the theaters for like a month. You know, if you want to see a movie, you better go see it because it's not going to be there very long. They used to be in so much longer, so they just had more time to rake in revenue. But then, a year or so after the movie was in theaters, it would come out on tape and DVD. And then that was a whole new market. That was a whole new opportunity for studios to make more money. And there's a lot of movies that did not necessarily perform as well in theaters, but then had spectacular home release sales. Like The Princess Bride was one that didn't really find its audience when it was in the theaters, but when it came out on tape and then on disc, you know, it exploded. You know, Braveheart made a lot of money in theaters, but it also made a lot on DVD later. You know, the Braveheart DVD sales were really strong. And nowadays, though, at Disney especially, I'm just baffled by them. You know, I don't want to say I'm smarter than them, because if I was, then obviously I'd, you know, everyone listening to this would know exactly who I was. but so I'm not saying that, but I'm just kind of baffled by some of the things they do. You know, like, consider this. Let's say Toy Story 5 comes out, Austin, and let's say you have, you know, your wife, and let's say you have 3 kids. You go to see Toy Story 5. Let's say it costs $10 a ticket. So you end up spending $50 to see the movie once. A fraction of that $50 goes to the studio, and then a fraction of it goes to the theater. And it's not always 50-50 like people say, especially early on, you know, depending on how long it's been since the movie was out. But, you know, let's just say for the sake of this that it's a 50-50 split. So 25 of those $50 goes to Disney, and then the other 25 goes to the theater. So every time you take your family to see that movie, Disney gets $25 in this example. Or how much is a Disney Plus subscription these days? It's like
10,
depending
10,
on
$10.
$10. Let's say it's $10. I think it could be less. Sometimes it's less, because they're trying to bring more people in so that they can sell their data, and that's how they really make their money through it. Anyway, but let's say it's $10. So for $10 a month, you get unlimited access to this vast library of content that they have on there, and you can watch it as many times as you want. And to me, it just seems like, would Disney rather have the $25 I'd get from only, audiences only being able to see something new when it's in the theaters, or just the $10? You see what I'm saying? Like, to me, the accounting doesn't add up. But what do I know? On the other hand, a clock hanging on your wall will use more electricity over the course of its life than your microwave oven will, because it's constantly running. So maybe Disney's just counting on, if everyone is paying this small subscription fee that may not be going to the theater at all otherwise, maybe it does make more sense. But I kind of doubt it, because they're having a hard time fulfilling the amount of impressions they promise to their advertisers.
Yeah, it's definitely a shift in our world, right? It went from literally VHS to DVDs to Blu-ray and now digital. And the fact that, like, what's the largest, streaming service in the world? YouTube. And then what's second, when you look at the numbers of like Netflix, Hulu, HBO, Disney Plus, these guys, the number one streaming service is not even any of those people. It's not even MGM or, Amazon to a degree, but the number one is Tubi. It's free. It's AVOD. It's advertising. And I think that's the future of us, right? That's the future. That's just my gut. That's just my sense. And I do you think that we are long gone? Will we ever see a Good Will Hunting again? Like what
a mid-budget drama?
A mid-budget good drama that is going to make 10x at the box office, because who doesn't love Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, smoking a cigarette in their Boston accent.
Yeah. Do you like apples? That's a great part. Do you like apples? I got a number. How do you like them apples? Yeah. I would like to say yes, that there will be. I don't want to say no, because I can't remember when. It was like in the late 1800s. Apparently, there was some serious talk of closing the patent office, because everything that could have been invented already was. In like 1890 or some, ridiculous, obviously, before the invention of the airplane and any of that stuff. So Austin, I think there is. I think that as the balance of power shifts from these studios that are making these massive tentpole project, Doomsday Avengers type movies, it's going to shift to smaller level creators. And, it just depends. But they could try to keep making like these Avengers style things with AI. But one of the side effects of AI that I anticipate is that it will actually has the potential to increase a cultural appreciation for good acting. Because people are going to get sick of AI schlop, and no matter how good it gets, and it's getting really good, it's getting scary good, but the uncanny valley is always there. And, people can tell on some level, they can tell that there's something off about this. Like, even if you show an AI video to your grandma or something, she has no clue how to work a VHS player, let alone, what CGI is, let alone AI. And she'll still, through her spectacles, she'll be like, what? This just looks kind of weird. Like, what is this? This is not. And it's because there's not a soul. It's because you're watching pixels, as opposed to someone giving a performance.
No, for sure. 1,000% agree. 1,000. I think it's going to be a hybrid of both, right? Just like you have a Honda, a Prius, or, a kind of like a hybrid electric and gas. it's still the car's still going to move you forward. So I think in the future, I'm agreeing with you. It is soulless, but it's gonna, if you know the tools, you could combine, both, and you can make something pretty nice,
Yeah,
like we
it's kind of
did,
like,
yeah,
yeah,
with Knights of the Cross.
yeah, yeah. It's yeah, it's gonna be it's epic. It's
Yeah.
gonna be so cool. But it's kind of like, like when Kindles came out, people were considering like, well, are books even going to exist in the future?
Hmm.
Um, you know, there's something about a book that when you gift someone a book, as opposed to, hey, I purchased you a PDF of you know War and Peace. I'll email it to you. Happy birthday. Like that's not. It's not the same. Like I think we'll always have books. I think that we'll always have feature films, and there's also a big resurgence and appreciation for physical media, DVDs and Blu-rays.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's another thing I'm noticing. Because if something's on streaming, it could go away. Netflix, they pull stuff off.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I don't, I guess I'm going to mention his name, but like I guess I was listening to a podcast with David Spade, and
Mm,
he said, "Hey, they pulled Emperor's New Groove. I'm so upset. Like out of all the movies, Joe Dirt, they pulled Emperor's New Groove off Disney." And I was just like, that's the greatest. Like I was walking in the park and I heard a little girl say, pull the lever, Crunk. I mean,
yeah,
the movie still holds up. And it's just so upsetting that a company that could make a decision like that, they yanked such a popular film.
it is crazy. That's like one of the few funny animated Disney movies. For all the strengths of Disney movies, they're typically not. Even if they're good, they're typically not like laugh out loud funny per se. Their strengths lie in other areas. But Emperor's New Groove is like one of the few that are actually like laugh out loud funny, in my
No,
opinion.
1,000% agree. I want to ask you before we go, you are a very talented filmmaker. We did make Generation Debt together. It did very well, by the way, on Tubi. So
Yeah.
I want to ask if tomorrow you had a $20 million check to make anything you want, no strings attached, what would you direct? Would it be another Western, a faith-based epic, or something totally unexpected?
Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Augusta Precious Metals. In today's uncertain world, protecting your retirement and your family's future has never been more important. That's why Augusta is offering you a free gold and silver IRA company criteria checklist. The simple guide shows you how to spot scams, avoid dishonest companies, and keep your savings safe. Augusta Precious Metals is built on trust, transparency, and integrity, the kind of values every American family deserves. They've helped thousands of people protect what they've worked for, and they can help you too. Take action today. Visit AugustaPreciousMetals.com or just hit the link in the bio and get your free checklist. Again, that's AugustaPreciousMetals.com or click the link in the bio.
That's an awesome question. There are a lot of projects that I, have dreamed of doing. A lot of scripts that I've written. It would have to be. I'd have to take a stab at this one project that's this big space opera in the vein of Star Wars, Star Trek. It's kind of like that. It's an original project. I first came up with it when I was like 13, and it's just been in the back of my mind my entire life. And that's the reason why I went to film school. Really, was because like, well, if I don't make this movie, then no one's going to. So I guess it's on me, you know. So yeah, it would have to be that. It would have to be that. Yeah, but like I said, it's an original story. It's an original, outer space adventure universe. But it definitely like would scratch the same itch that the original Star Wars trilogy does, or the Star Trek movies of the '80s, or like the original Battlestar Galactica series. It would feel very much like a post Star Wars space opera movie.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
the trend I see in Hollywood with those space operas, I used to work in Glendale, and I used to work at the same offices as Disney, and I was a copywriter. And as a copywriter, I worked with very famous writers. And one story that stood out to me from the writers was, have you heard of The Martian? It was a
Yeah,
book called The
Andy Weir.
Martian. Yeah, yeah, and that project picked up really quick. And then actually not even a writer in our office. Like I said, it's something out of a movie, right? I mean, we're in the same building as Disney, we're in Glendale, everyone's working. But there was another writer, I forget his name, and we were really good friends. He ended up creating a movie starring Kevin Hart called Fatherhood. And so, just something that I've noticed in Hollywood is they don't want to take risk anymore, right?
No, they
And
don't.
so the trend that I'm seeing is some guy like you or me go in and they write a book or they write an audio book and then they go into the copyright office, literally costs $20 or $50, and they say, "This project is my project, and if anybody steals it, I'm going to sue the crap out of you." Type of vibe. And those projects tend to do well. They get shopped around, and when there's virality, they get picked up. And then next thing you know, Matt Damon's playing your character in Mars.
Yeah, and Ridley Scott's directing. Yeah. Um, you can't really blame Hollywood for being risk averse, and you're not. I know you're not, but just one of the common complaints that people lob at Hollywood movies, myself included, is like, oh, there's never anything original. It's all just sequels or remakes. But you know, it's annoying and it's frustrating. But at the same time, when was the last time you, member of the audience listening to this podcast, when was the last time you went to a movie in the theater that was not a sequel or a remake? Maybe it was really recently. Maybe you saw F1, which, is an original movie. But, that movie definitely has a lot of precedent. There definitely are similarities to previous race movies like Days of Thunder, and obviously Brad Pitt is a known variable. He's not exactly an unknown actor at this point. So there was a movie that came out recently. I believe it was called The Gorge, and I think it had Daisy Ridley. I'm guilty of this too because I didn't actually see it, but I heard about it, and it was an original science fiction concept, but it just got ripped apart. It got ripped apart by a lot of the. There's a lot of YouTube channels that are essentially they're fans of superhero movies, of sci-fi movies, and stuff like that. They're kind of like the voice of people like you and I, but more times than not, they end up making a career out of just talking crap on stuff. Not always, but it's like it's not that Hollywood never makes anything original, and obviously, just because something's original, it still has to be good. Like that's just a given, and Hollywood, sometimes forgets that. But at the end of the day, making movies is such a huge process. It's a miracle that anything gets made at all, let alone that anything is good. And it's sad to see something that is original come out and for it to just kind of like get ripped apart, like hungry piranhas just devouring it for the sake of you know um, enjoying some degree of clout. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, there are original projects out there. Keep an eye out for them, like Primitive War. I don't know if your audience has heard of this, but if you love dinosaurs like I do, Primitive War, I think it just came out. Yes, what's today? The 23rd. Came out like 2 days ago. Anyway, it's about the Vietnam War, but these Green Berets encounter some Jurassic and Cretaceous creatures in the jungles of Vietnam, and it looks awesome. And when's the last time we had a non-Jurassic World dinosaur movie? There was a movie called 65 that had Adam Driver in it a few years ago. Sam Raimi actually produced it, I think. But anyway, if people want, what I'm trying to say is, if people want original content, if they want original stuff, then they have to vote for it with their dollars. You know, they can't just sit around like, you know, you like the original stuff. Well, then prove it. You know, go support the movies that you want to see, and don't just be like, well, I just want to go. I'll watch it when it's on streaming. No, go watch it. You know, watching something at home is such a totally different psychological experience than watching something in the theater. And you know, anyway, something like Primitive War, where you got the dinosaurs look awesome. They look scarier than anything I've seen from a recent Jurassic World movie. You know, so I'm definitely gonna see that in the theater. I know that watching that at home won't do it justice. So, you know, if you want something original, then keep your eye out for it. And when it comes along, don't just give some dopey excuse, oh, I'll just see when it comes out on streaming. Don't, you know, because that's not going to help those projects at all. Anyway, what was the question that made me foam at the mouth and go off on that rant?
The question was, you dodged my $20 million budget movie because the world wants to know what's in your mind.
Yeah, my space movie.
Your
Yeah.
space movie,
Yeah.
Which I know the details of, but the audience doesn't know. We kind of want to do, you know, a little peekaboo of like what.
Okay, I can tell you the premise. Yeah, it's all I've written the script. It's all copyrighted, so you know, I'll come after you if you steal it. Not you, Austin, but you know, all of those conniving hacks out in the audience. Anyway, the premise is that Lieutenant Hark Cowboy Duggan, that's his call sign. He is the cleverest officer in the entire transastral galactorate, or so he thinks. And until one day, the patrol ship that he's the pilot of encounters this giant, essentially like a space leviathan, this giant creature that roams through the vacuum of space itself. And he has a personal vendetta against this thing in a very kind of Captain Ahab-like manner, because he encountered this thing in his past, and it completely upended his life and took away something very important to him. So when this thing reappears, he has his chance to, you know, unload all of the lasers and missiles that his patrol ship has, and in so doing, he ends up getting through the battle with this space creature, ends up getting stranded on this medieval planet of swords and castles. And the space monster is not exactly what he thought it was. And anyway, the people on this planet end up being dependent on him to save them from a very powerful force who ends up to actually be a very dark reflection of Duggan, the main character himself. Essentially kind of like his alien doppelganger, which he doesn't find out until well into like at the midpoint of the movie. Anyway, the working title for it is Astral Adventure. There's a lot more to it than that, obviously, but I don't want to be like Patton Oswalt on that Parks and Recreation episode when he does a filibuster and pitches to the town of Pawnee his vision for a Marvel Star Wars crossover. But that's kind of it in a nutshell. Yeah, I'd love to, you know, that would be it. That's what I would do with that 20 million. But I'd be really smart about it. I would put half of it aside. I'd use the 20 million to attract more investors and to get even more money, because, you know, more money is always good. And then I would nail down a really solid marketing and distribution plan. And I would get very clear on that. Very absolutely laser focused clear on how it is that we're going to market this movie, how we're going to distribute this movie, and how we're going to make a lot of money from this. What I would do is, honestly, I'm not sure I would even play the streaming game. I would self-distribute. You know, I would figure out, like, I wouldn't even really go through like a distribution company. I would figure out how to self-distribute, because then you really know how your dollars are being spent. You know, I just talked to a guy. You know who this person is, Austin. had a recent
He's a
conversation.
vet. He's a good guy. He's a big guy. Well, he's a good guy. He's in
Yeah,
a lot of
he's a
movies.
wonderful guy.
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and give him a shout out. His name is Seth Christian. He's an awesome guy. He's got a lot of really great projects in the works. And I know Seth because he hired me to be a personal assistant to the producers on a feature film called Echo Boomers that was filmed 6 years ago. It was 6 years ago this very month. I feel like Ebenezer Scrooge, but yeah, it was August of 2019. Anyway, really cool project. Patrick Schwarzenegger was in it.
I was about to say
was,
Patrick Schwarzenegger was in the movie. Yeah.
Alex Pettyfer, the great Michael Shannon, better known as General Zod. It was a cool project. It was a really cool project, and they were all really great to work with. Anyway, Seth was telling me about his experience, and just kind of like the facts of distribution. And one of the things I'd say to your audience, especially as it pertains to filmmaking, is don't just expect people to do it. Kind of goes back to, if you want a job done right, you have to do it yourself. That's not always true. Like, you have to delegate some things, obviously, like making a movie. Like George Lucas, he didn't do every single thing. He didn't write the music. He didn't design all the spaceships. He wasn't the one in the workshop mixing the rubber to make the masks for the aliens. He had to delegate, but you have to be smart about it. You have to delegate to the right people. Anyway, so with these distribution companies, you have to be careful with them, and so I would really understand the world of distribution, figure out how to do it myself, and to do it as effectively as I could. Not to throw any distribution companies under the bus. That's certainly not my intention. I'm just saying, know what you're doing, know what you're getting into, and understand that distribution is really the key to making money in the film business. I've said this to you before, Austin. In Dune, he who controls the spice controls the universe. In filmmaking, he who controls distribution controls the universe. Because, like I said, if you make the coolest movie ever and you figure out how to make it for the smallest amount of money possible, which is a huge plus, but no one sees it, it's not going to make any money. And, at the end of the day, our objectives are to make something really cool and artistic that's going to impact people in a really positive way. But, we also want to get paid. And that's totally valid. Anyway, so, yeah, I'd figure out, I'd really understand distribution. And then I think I might even just skip streaming and just after it's out of theaters, do it on physical media only.
No, I want to say one thing, for young filmmakers listening right now, maybe they've got an iPhone and a dream. What's the one piece of advice you would give them about getting their work out there and actually building an audience?
Okay, that's a good question. There's some advice I gave in Generation Debt, the project you and I made this on Tubi. That advice still holds. One of the things is basically don't wait for an opportunity to plop in your lap. Create your own opportunities. That's the first thing. The second thing is, you have no idea. I'm addressing a young person right now. It's just starting out. You have no idea how easy it is right now to do things that would have been impossible for Austin and I, just a few short years ago. Really, truly. I would say be smart. Okay, be smart. Great advice. What I mean by that is identify the areas in which you are ignorant. Because we all have them. And expand your knowledge. Find out, okay, well, what are the areas that I really don't know a lot about? What the heck is this guy talking about distribution and all this? If at any point I said something that just seemed really off the wall or like really weird, rewind, the playback in this video, find it, listen to what I said, and then go do some research and find out what it is I'm talking about on your own. Take some initiative. You have no excuses. ChatGPT is really good for research. Perplexity.ai is really good for research. Use these tools that are available to better yourself and to figure out how to legally and in a valid way make money. You know, there's a lot of ways to make money online these days that might be legal technically, but they're not valid. Come on. And I think we all know what I'm talking about. I'm not going to go into detail, but you know, don't be like that. Come on. Don't sell yourself out. You know, that's one big thing. Don't be a sellout. Have some principles, you know. Be that hero that you aspire to be like when you're a kid. But just don't be afraid to do a lot of research and to figure things out and to experiment. You know, YouTube Shorts. I'm telling you, it's a great way to get a lot of eyes on something. You know, like I had a YouTube short that got 3 million views. That's not as much as, you know, other channels, but for me it was a lot.
And that's impressive. Three million views on one short. That's pretty impressive. No, I mean, not many people could have that badge and say, "Hey, you know, I pulled 3 million views on YouTube."
Well, look at how many shorts I made, though.
Yeah.
And then tell me, you know, gosh, I don't even. I could check right now. I'm not gonna check. I don't know. I've probably got like 50 to 100 shorts that I've uploaded, and most of them are just like little tiny snippets that I cut from my, you know, long movie. When I made my Western movie, I was in a position where I had more time to work on that, but I need to take some of my own advice and not allow things to be an excuse to not work on something, because if something's really important to you, you'll make time for it. And you know, how many minutes or hours a day do people spend scrolling on their phones? You know, myself included. I'm definitely guilty of it too. But you know, a lot of it nowadays is just, it's a balance between being what am I trying to say? You want to be a creator. You don't just want to be an idle consumer, you know, but you have to consume content to some degree in order to learn, like, okay, well, how does the YouTube algorithm work? What's going on with it right now? What are the latest updates? You know, you have to spend time figuring that sort of thing out. But yeah, for me, we've got my Western is now going to be on Christian channel, and so you can watch it there. And then you know, for me, it's just taking the lessons that I learned, you know, from my successes and from my failures, and applying that to the next project, really. You know, so yeah, I have what I'd like to, here's another tip you can take to the bank. What I'm about to tell you will eliminate your excuse of writer's block. I don't get writer's block anymore because I will write multiple projects at once. And when I get stuck on one project, I'm like, okay, well, I'll go over here and I'll just write this other project where I don't have writer's block, you know. And some of the stories might be similar. Like, I have 2 different space adventure stories that take place in a different universe. The one I mentioned and then another one. And when I get stuck on one, I come over and I work on another one. Or I'll work on this other project that's, you know, completely different. So that's another good thing that I wish I had known about sooner. A good, you know, hack.
Well, you know, I want to let our audience know that we'll be seeing you again very shortly for the Knights of the Cross premiere podcast. So
awesome.
We hope to see you there. Grab a beer and really really just chill and talk about our experience on set with that. So I'm just really happy to have you here. You know, you're very insightful. You know, you're proven yourself in the YouTube algorithm. And we're all looking forward to what's coming next as far as shorts and streaming. And, you know, when you hit the lotto and you make your film, you let us know. But in the meantime, where can our audience find you and support you?
Yeah, there's my YouTube channel, of course, which is at Robert Eric Jenkins on YouTube. You can look up my Western film, which is called Hell to Pay, which I would encourage you to watch on Christian channel. What else? Yeah, well, I'll have all that stuff in the description of the video. I can't remember my Instagram handle and stuff like that off the top of my head, because my main focus is YouTube. But you should be, it's good to be on other platforms too. Hit me up. Let's see what you have in mind.
If you have a movie idea and you have a $20 million check, call Robert.
Yes. Exactly.
Robert, man, this has been a blast. You're not just making films, you're sparking conversations about the real world, student debt, consumer culture, and the future of storytelling itself. For everyone listening, check out Robert Eric Jenkins' work, Hell to Pay. It's on YouTube. Go and watch it and give it a like, share it. And Generation Debt is streaming now on Tubi and ChristianChannel.com. And keep an eye out because I have a feeling this is just the beginning for Robert. If you enjoyed today's episode, share it with a friend, leave us a review, and subscribe to the Christian Channel podcast for more conversations about the crossroads of faith, art, and the future of media. Robert, God bless you, and thanks for hanging out with us. And to everyone listening, we'll see you next time.